The Batman. No, not that one. This one is a very interesting Batman animated show that decided to focus on a younger Bruce Wayne. But it's not interesting just for that. Also find it interesting because this is the one and only Batman show that was being aired, whilst another version of the character was still being shown. Yeah, the show started airing in September of 2004, and by this time Justice League Unlimited had already been airing for the past 2 months. So we had 2 different versions of Batman airing at the same time, but the only catch to it though is that Justice League Unlimited was airing on Cartoon Network, but this show was airing on Kids WB. You would think that with 2 different versions of the character going out at the same time that this version of the character didn't do well, but no, the opposite's true since this show managed to last 5 seasons. That's why I wanted to go back and watch this show again, because I wanted to see if this show is as good as I thought it was. To make it clear before I talk about each episode, I've never seen every episode in this show before because airings of this show were few and far between down here in Australia. All of the DC Animated Universe shows were aired a lot more than this show ever was, but I still did manage to catch quite a few episodes when they aired on Channel 9 when Kids WB was on there instead of 9 Go. With that, this Batman show isn't talked about near as much as I thought it would be or even should be here on YouTube, so let's start the Batman off with So the first episode of The Batman has Batman dealing with the Joker for the first time, as he's taken over Arkham Asylum and has plans to gas Gotham. Watching this first episode alone reminds me of how this show has the source. Yeah, it's pretty damn good, and before giving points about the actual episode itself, I actually like the intro a lot. It's quite different to other superhero shows, but still manages to easily make you understand what kind of tone the show's going for. I also like the touch that when we see the villains in the intro, there's a sketch of them first, and then we get to see what they actually look like in the show. This show overall leans a bit more into the character's gothic nature more than any other Batman show, and it's just really damn cool because instead of doing something similar to Batman the Animated Series, this show's just trying to do something a bit different. Speaking about different things, I really like this version of both Bruce Wayne and Batman. This time around with this show, they decided to make Bruce Wayne much younger, and around the time that this show aired, we hadn't really seen a younger Bruce Wayne in any kind of Batman movie or show, and I think that this show utilises that really well. They mainly do that by showing more of how Bruce struggles between balancing his billionaire Bruce Wayne and Batman lifestyles. On top of that, Rino Romano's Bruce and Batman voices are honestly really good. But even though a lot's different with this Batman show compared to others, I will say that there are some really awesome character designs and some not so good ones. The best examples of good designs are obviously the Batman, the Joker, and a few other villains, but what did they do to this reporter? His face looks really odd, but anywho, about the episode itself, it's just a pretty damn good first episode that introduces us to the world that this show's setting up. They managed to set up quite a lot in this one episode alone without it feeling forced at all, and I have to say the Joker's introduction is the best. Whilst on that topic, Kevin Michael Richardson's Joker definitely has the sauce. Yet again, something different, and I'm already starting to notice that the show just manages to do what it's trying to do really damn well. With that, I already like Bruce and Alfred's relationship, since they managed to nail their chemistry in this episode alone, with Alfred coming off as more of a father figure to Bruce, but also looks out for him a lot and can be a bit sarcastic. We also get our introduction to the GCPD, with Detective Ethan Bennett and his new partner Detective Alan Yin, and I'm definitely interested in seeing how they develop as characters in the future, since I think that Ethan could be like Jim Gordon to Batman in this universe. It's also really cool to see that Bruce is actually good friends with Ethan, and I think that it would be a great contrast between how he acts with Bruce compared to Batman, but we have to see where that all goes in the future. Also, ayo, Joker said the thing?
Blame it on the bats in my belfry.
The second episode of the show, of course, focuses on the Penguin, as Oswald decides to rebuild his family's fortune by going out and robbing some of the rich and wealthy in Gotham. Hey, this episode isn't as good as the first, but still pretty good. Yeah, this is just another episode like the last where we get an introduction to another one of Batman's new villains, and talking about that, SpongeBob Penguin is good. He's just a massive asshole, but when it comes to Batman having to deal with him, it's cool to see that this time around the Penguin can actually fight, and also has 2 assistants, henchwomen? I don't know exactly what they're meant to be, but they're known as the Kabuki twins as they help him fight Batman as well. Their designs are pretty damn cool as well. With that, I find it kind of funny that Alfred was so pissed about Oswald stealing his tray that he decided to sneak around the Cobblepot's old mansion to find it and eventually got kidnapped. One thing I noticed with these episodes so far is that you can tell that it's a product of its time with how the characters act and the kind of things they get up to. Especially with the type of music that plays at the charity event that Bruce hosts, and even the end where Bruce plays basketball with Ethan. Also, really, the police have guns that don't even look like guns? Well, that's a downgrade. Anywho, that doesn't really take anything away from the episode itself because it would have been a network mandate, but it's just something I noticed. As I said though, this episode isn't as good as the first one. Traction follows Batman as he runs into yet another new villain for the first time, being Bane, as he has to find a way to beat Bane since he's obviously much stronger than him when using his venom. What can I say? This show's just off to a pretty good start. So we're already 3 for 3 with these episodes, and even though I think that this Bane looks like Forearms from Ben 10, his character and especially his voice is pretty good. I kind of wish that he looked similar to what he does before using the venom when he actually uses it, but not everything can be great. Also, whilst I'm talking about the negatives, I didn't mention it before, but the Batmobile was really designed to be a toy, wasn't it? With a design like this, you can probably tell that WB made them design it this way because of the toy sales. Anyways, this episode's just pretty good. I like how Bane's a really big threat to Batman in this episode, and even after getting his ass kicked and thrown through a brick wall, he has to avoid both Ethan and Alan. I also like how this episode tackles the fact that Bruce could have had a chance to move on with his life since everyone thinks that the Batman's gone, but instead of giving up, Bruce decides to try and use the invention in the Batcave as a new Batsuit to take on Bane. Goes above the last episode but below the first. This episode has Selena Kyle becoming Catwoman, as she manages to steal Batman's utility belt after running into him for the first time, as he obviously needs to get it back from her. Man, this is probably the best episode yet. Honestly, I have to say that this is my favourite so far. I really think that this episode has done Selena Kyle and Catwoman really well, and on top of that, this might be, if not one of my favourite Catwoman designs. You can't tell me that her design does not have the sauce. I find it kind of funny that Catwoman just becomes a massive inconvenience for Batman when she gets access to his utility belt, as she accidentally causes the robot from the last episode to nearly destroy the Batcave and make the Batmobile get into accidents on the road. Of course, Batman has to help Catwoman as she decided to try and steal something with the belt, but she ended up failing at the start of the episode and ends up getting caught in a bit of a situation. But I gotta say, this whole scene is cool because we really get to see how the two can work together when they need to. The villains themselves aren't interesting since it's basically just a Yakuza gang with not much of a personality, but it's good that this episode mainly focuses on Catwoman and Batman like I should. Goes at the top. The Man Who Would Be a Bat is obviously the Man-Bat episode, where Dr. Kirk Langstrom tests his new serum on himself, where he ends up transforming into Man-Bat. This is cool. Well, the start of the episode alone got me quite interested, as both Ethan and Alan find a trail of bats that lead them to Wayne Enterprises, as they find out that Kirk was working on the serum with the assistance of bats. I find it quite interesting that Kirk managed to manipulate Bruce into believing that he's trying to cure deafness, by saying that he's trying to cure his daughter. It's also cool to see this show try to do something different with Kirk's character, as he just wants to be feared like the Batman, and decides to make the Man-Bat serum to do so, and hell yeah, this Man-Bat design is so good. With that, even the transformation scene's really damn cool. I do think that this is one of the weaker episodes though, because I feel like it gets less and less interesting as the episode goes along. I was quite interested at the start, but it really fizzled out after that, and that's not to say that this wasn't interesting, because I still enjoyed it quite a bit, but it's probably the weakest episode so far. We follow, of course, Batman as he manages to run into Mr. Freeze, as he's been trying to steal some rare and valuable diamonds. No way Clancy Brown's Mr. Freeze. Yeah, he voices Mr. Freeze in this show, and I really like his voice for the role. Of course, whenever I hear his voice, I always picture him as Mr. Krabs or Lex, but I really like the voice he puts on for the role. Speaking about good character designs, goddamn Mr. Freeze's design goes hard. This show really didn't have to go as hard as it does for the character designs, but I'm glad that it did. Also, yeah, I didn't talk about his design until now because this is obviously the first episode he actually shows up in, even though he's one of the main villains that shows up in the intro. Into the episode itself, I really didn't expect a reference to The Shining to be the first line after the intro.
All crime fighting and no play make Master Bruce an extremely dull boy.
Anyways, as the character of Mr. Freeze goes in this episode, I think it's good. We get to find out that Victor Freeze is actually a bank robber, where Batman took him down once, where he thought that he died in the lab, but he ended up surviving to become Mr. Freeze. That's actually kind of an interesting way to change his character, even though it obviously doesn't have the depth or the emotional connection that the BTAS backstory does. I will say the episode ends up focusing on how Bruce starts to feel like that he's actually a criminal, since he thinks that he made Victor become what he is, and it's just really neat to see him struggle with that, even though he changes his ways after a nightmare of Star Wars blaster effects killing his parents. Also, hell yeah, we get another Batsuit, as Alfred decides to build Bruce a new Batsuit to be able to deal with Mr. Freeze, and low-key, this suit looks really good. Before I move on to the next episode, this episode does the Batman ice skates thing better than Batman and Robin ever did. This episode goes above traction, but below the Bat in the Belfry. I see what they did here. They titled it basically the same, but changed chill to heat, because of Firefly using heat. Cheeky. So yeah, as I said, this episode has Firefly in it, as Batman has to stop him, whilst Bruce tries to get a charity contract from the mayor. This just might be the weakest episode so far. I still think it's solid, but it definitely isn't amazing. I don't know if it's just me, but I've never been a big fan of Firefly as a character, even though his design goes hard as fuck. Ironically, this is one of the only Firefly suits that manages to incorporate the fact that he's a Firefly into his suit design. Yeah, I find it kinda odd that most other designs don't really add that into the design of the character, but this show does that extremely well. Also, I recognize that voice. Oh shit, it's Bart Allen from Young Justice? I thought I knew that voice from something. Anyways, no way, Mayor Adam West is in this show? Well, the mayor's actually named Mayor Grange, but that's actually pretty cool. Another Batman show with Adam West in it. I really dig it when shows do this, but with that, I like how the mayor was an old friend of Thomas's and wants to help Bruce as much as possible, but Bruce has to convince the others to get the contract for Thomas's children's hospital that he built. It's also pretty cool that Goth Corp's behind everything that's going on in this episode, as they actually hired Firefly to commit arson on their targets, whilst the public company Goth Corp bought out Thomas's children's hospital to give themselves good PR. These episodes are really on a roll at the moment, aren't they? There hasn't been one bad or boring episode at all, and I couldn't be more happy about that. I just hope that they manage to keep that up. So even though this is my least favourite so far, let's find out if it gets any better with... Q&A has Batman facing yet another new villain, the Clue Master, as they've been kidnapping people in Gotham. Well, now this is the weakest episode so far. This episode is just noticeably weaker than the other previous episodes, but it isn't bad at all. It's mainly because I'm not a big fan of the villain in this episode. The Clue Master really isn't interesting to me. They have kind of an interesting gimmick since the villain lost in a game show but felt like the show was rigged against him, and is now seeking revenge on the people that ran the game show. Also, I thought I recognised the voice of Clue Master. It's Glenn Shaddix, and man, the voice is really good. There just isn't really too much to this episode at all. Definitely isn't bad, but it's the worst so far. Heyo, alright. So this episode yet again has Batman facing a new villain, but this time around it's the ventriloquist with Scarface, as they're out committing heists, as Batman needs to stop them. As this episode goes though, it's pretty solid. I will say at first, I wasn't really digging Scarface's design. No point mentioning Arnold Wesker since he looks the way he usually does, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. I'm used to Scarface looking like your typical mobster from the 1930s and whatnot, but this time around they've gone for more of a different approach, looking more like Tony Montana, obviously from the movie Scarface, and I really think it works. With that, Homer Simpson voices both the characters? That's quite cool, but I kinda see it since I hear Krusty the Clown in Scarface's voice when he gets shitty. One thing that kinda sucks is that you don't get to see Scarface with a Tommy gun at all in this episode. Instead they decide to build a giant Scarface for Batman to face off against. At least we get the usual fare with the character, as Wesker has two different personalities, but this time around, Wesker and Scarface decided to do what they do after they got booed off the stage when performing at a comedy club. I'll be honest, with a character like this, I definitely prefer to see the tragic side behind the character, like what Beataz did, but this definitely ain't bad at all. Goes above the Man Who Would Be a Bat, but below Cole the Cobblepot. So we get an episode of the show that isn't just an episode of Batman having to face a new villain, but instead we see Batman as he has to investigate some crimes that the Joker's seemingly been up to, even though we're still locked up in Arkham, and it's good. Yeah, this episode's just good overall. I'm glad that this episode gives us more development on the Joker, and also his and Batman's dynamic, as Batman has to question the Joker and Arkham to find out what's going on. Also, what's with that voice from the Arkham worker? It is the most random voice for someone that works at the asylum. It sounds like a stoner voice.
Jeez. The Batman! I gotta call the police.
Also really like seeing how Batman can think on the fly when he needs to, and the best example of that is when the Joker leaves Batman in his cell, as he decides to actually disguise himself as the Joker when the worker alerts the police to the fact that Batman's in the cell. I just don't have too much else to say about this episode besides from it just being an overall good episode. Goes above the Big Dummy, but below Cole the Cobblepot. Bird of Prey has the Penguin break into Wayne Manor, as Bruce is doing an interview for a TV show, where he has to find a way to avoid the cameras so he can get a chance to suit up and take down the Penguin. Alright, so this is better than the last episode. I actually quite like how the Penguin's done in this show, since he's now basically just jealous of Bruce Wayne and wants to steal his wealth and fortune. Also, they're really doing a full day in the life thing with Bruce Wayne for this show, and hey, this was way before every YouTuber ever did it, so alright, I'll take it. With that, I think it's pretty damn cool that the Penguin actually almost reveals the Batman's identity on camera, but Alfred's the one that manages to give him the chance to get out of his situation, and of course beat the Penguin. I will say, what I'm noticing so far in this show is that none of the episodes are amazing. They're all just solid or good overall, so I definitely hope that it manages to pick up a bit, because there is some good stuff in this show that could be better. Best part of this episode though in my eyes is probably when Bruce comes back to Wayne Manor, where he got Alfred to dress up as Batman to make him believe that Bruce isn't Batman. Goes above Call of the Cobblepot, but below traction. Damn, so the Joker's back yet again, where he wreaks havoc across Gotham with a new gadget of his that manages to turn anything into rubber or a putty, which it seems to be both in this episode since the Joker uses it to get through a bank vault, but also make his car and henchman bouncy, whilst the Chief of Police pressures both Ethan and Alan to take down the Batman. Okay, hell yeah, so this episode is actually the first part of 2 episodes. Yeah, so this is only one part of the story where the Joker goes on a spree, until the Batman comes in to stop his plans, where the Joker ends up kidnapping Ethan after he tries to take the Joker in. This is definitely the best episode so far. I really like that we get to see more of Ethan and Bruce's friendship in this episode as well, as we also get to see how Ethan's forced to take down the Batman, even when he seems to be on his side. It's actually really well developed, and I also like how Bruce actually considers telling Ethan his secret, so he doesn't end up accidentally hurting Ethan when out as Batman. It just shows how much trust Bruce has in Ethan, and it's great. With that, the sequence where the Joker tries to break Ethan's mind is great. Well, actually, the whole third act of this episode is. Obviously, both Batman and Alan come in to try and save Ethan, and end up doing so, and holy shit, Ethan ends up turning into Clayface? Well damn, that's a way to leave us with a cliffhanger for the second part. As I said though, this episode's at the top. Alright, so the final episode of the first season continues right where we left off, on the reveal that Ethan has become Clayface, where Batman has to eventually try and stop him. Damn man, this episode really one-upped the last episode, didn't it? It definitely did, because this is a pretty damn good episode. I hadn't really talked about Ethan much as a character before, but I really like how this show had shown his character in every episode before his transformation, so his transformation really means a lot more when it happens. I think it works, and I gotta say that so far I think that Clayface is the most interesting villain in this show because of the development. I genuinely just think that this episode is pretty damn good because this is the first villain in this show that really has a true motivation that isn't just more than just because they can or some petty revenge. Also, I gotta say, I really like how Ellen ends up believing what Ethan thought about the Batman in the end, and decides to help Batman when he needs it or whenever she needs his help. It's genuinely good stuff. I don't have much else to say about this episode, so let's wrap up the season. Well damn, this first season is solid. Definitely nothing amazing here, but so far I'm actually liking the show. I'm mainly liking how unique and different this show is, from the designs of everything to even how 2000s this show feels, because it's really just a breath of fresh air. I know that a young Bruce Wayne isn't really a breath of fresh air anymore, but at the time this came out, it was definitely a breath of fresh air in 2004. What movie or show covered a younger Bruce Wayne at this time? I genuinely can't think of one, since Bruce Wayne in the show's canon is 26, but in the movies like Tim Burton's Batman and whatnot, he's usually in his early to mid 30s. With that, I really like how this show decides to focus on Bruce, as he has to balance both being a crime-fighting vigilante and a playboy billionaire at the same time, since Alfred gets involved in all of that quite a lot as well, and tries to help give Bruce a good balance of both throughout the season. On top of that, I really like how this show developed Bruce and Alfred's relationship. They really did it right here, where Alfred's a bit of a father figure to Bruce, and Alfred tries to help him out as much as possible, filling that father role that Bruce really needs. As all the episodes go in this season though, they're consistently solid overall. We really didn't get anything that made me have a big reaction until the final 2 episodes of the season, but that isn't particularly a bad thing at all, since the show's universe had to be developed before dropping bombshells on us, and I think it's done well. This show gives us a good amount of time to develop the characters, and makes us care about them until we get the reveal that Ethan has turned into Clayface at the end of the second last episode. It's honestly great stuff, and I'm really interested to see where this next season of the show goes, since there's a lot this show can do with the characters that have been established so far. So let's just go and find out how good the second season is. first episode of Season 2 has the Penguin and Catwoman teaming up as they want to steal a pair of gems, where Batman has to put a stop to them both. Alright, so we've gone back to the consistently solid episodes again. So we're back to this, and hey, it ain't bad at all, so that's good. I will say I really like how we start to see how Alan manages to help Batman out by drawing out the officer's attention elsewhere, so Batman can investigate the crime scene and find out who stole the relic that made Catwoman team up with the Penguin. Also, of course, the Penguin just ended up being down bad for Catwoman, but even though Catwoman was going to double-cross him, the Penguin actually managed to double-cross her and take both the relics. That's actually a neat twist, because I thought the Penguin would just be down bad for Catwoman, but no, he actually fools her. I find it quite cool that this show's tackling such a weird element with the Penguin using the two relics to harness the power of Ra, the sun god according to ancient Egyptian scribes, and I actually quite like that it manages to work as the Penguin uses the power to try and get a ransom from Gotham police. Also, hey, we get a bit of a bat signal going on at the end of the episode after the Penguin and Catwoman escape, which is quite cool. I'm interested to see where this season goes though, so let's find out. Okay, so we get to see this show's version of the Riddler, as he tries to go through with his plan to destroy the city, where both Detective Alan Yin and Batman have to work together to put a stop to the Riddler. Now this is what I want. This is pretty good. So this version of the Riddler is Marilyn Manson? Like, I'm not the first person that said that about this character, but goddamn, it's Robert Englund voicing the character, and the voice is awesome. Even though the design's quite odd, I will say that it does work with this universe. This is just a really good episode to see how Alan and Batman work off each other, since Batman's the one that has to help her with the riddles across Gotham, since she was actually forced to accept the Riddler's challenge. With that, the Riddler's actually a big threat to them both in a different way to any of the other villains in the show so far, since he manages to give even the Batman a run for his money when it comes to his smarts, where the Riddler even manages to kidnap them both and make him play his game until they get out. This isn't the best version of the character, but I do like it for what it is. Goes above the last episode. Fire and Ice brings both Mr. Freeze and Firefly back, where the two of them decide to team up to freeze Gotham, as Batman's obviously the only one that can stop them both. I do like how both Mr. Freeze and Firefly work off each other, but as the episode goes, it's the weakest yet. I will say I was confused why Firefly would work for Mr. Freeze, but duh, Mr. Freeze hired him to help. But wasn't he put in prison after the last episode he was in? So when did he get out? We don't get the answers to that? Okay. The episode just kind of goes back to the basics of this show, and it's just an alright episode. Nothing that's really worth noting, besides the fact that Alan gives Bruce a scare since he thinks that she knows that he's Batman, but mentions that she believes that he actually cares about what he's donating towards. Actually no, it's quite neat to see the police clap for Batman as he managed to save Gotham, and the whole police force, as most of them seem to have changed their minds about Batman. Still goes at the bottom of the season. So this is an episode I've been looking forward to watching again. But it has the Joker wreaking havoc in Gotham like usual, but this time around he's dressed as Batman, as Batman has to stop him, and also come up with a cure to a poison that the Joker's infected him with that will make him laugh to death. I'm just gonna come straight out and say it, this is the best episode so far. This shit actually slaps. It's such a neat idea to have the Joker imitate Batman, where he decides to enforce small crimes and infect them all with laughing gas as their punishment, and it's great to see the aftermath of people getting infected by the gas. It's disturbing, but goddamn, I like it. It works really well for a character like the Joker. Seeing how Bruce acts when affected by the Venom's really well done, as he can't control the laughter even when he's seeing the mayor's wife, as she was affected by the Joker gas. I also think it's pretty cool to see the Joker taking down the Penguin like the Batman would, but I will say that we should have seen the Batman emotionally breaking more during this main fight. It's still good since we still get to see Batman almost completely break at the end of the fight, right before curing himself, but we could have actually seen more of it during the fight. This episode definitely goes at the top though. Swamped has Killer Croc coming to Gotham, as he plans to submerge the whole city in water, so he can rob the whole city. This might just be the weakest episode of the season. Yet again, it's just another episode that isn't bad, but it's nothing amazing at all. Also, I'm not a fan of the design of Killer Croc. It just looks a lot like the lizard, instead of being half human, half crocodile. With that though, Ron Perlman does the voice? This show really has an all-star cast, doesn't it? Hey, I ain't complaining at all, because even though the show has a lot of recognizable names, they all usually do a really good job. As the episode itself goes, it's just your standard fare for the show, where the villain just wants to take over Gotham and does it in their own specific way. And yeah, it works, but it definitely gets boring after a while, since most of the episodes in Season 1 were like that. It's good that we're getting more villains in this show, but it would be nice if it was actually done in a different and interesting way. Also, ayo, the Batman has yet another suit, but this doesn't look as good as the other two. Before I move into the next episode, I just noticed that every punch and kick has the exact same sound effect, and when you notice that, it becomes really jarring. Yeah, literally, every punch or kick that lands has the exact same sound, and it takes me out of it a little, even though this is a smaller budget TV animated superhero show. This episode goes at the bottom though. I was gonna put it above Fire and Ice, but nah, I enjoyed that episode a little bit more. Okay, so speaking about something different, this time around we have the Penguin controlling Man-Bat through a sonic device that his bird stole from a scientist, as Alfred has to deal with a raccoon that's messing with the electronics in the Batcave. Damn man, this is a pretty similar quality to the last episode. First off, one thing I want to say that I find quite odd is that when the Penguin uses the device to control a giant bird that he can't train, it manages to make Kirk turn back into Man-Bat. I just find it odd because the last episode that Man-Bat was in, it was established that he would turn into Man-Bat forever if he took the serum 3 times, but he only took it twice, so how did he turn back into Man-Bat again? Just seems like a bit of an excuse to make Kirk turn back into Man-Bat again, but okay, there's probably some random reason. This episode ain't bad at all, but it's definitely much lighter in tone, and it just doesn't work that well in this episode. The only time I think it works is the fact that Alfred having to deal with a raccoon is a complete parallel to what Batman's doing with Man-Bat and the Penguin. It ends up tying into what Batman's doing, since the raccoon messes with the electronics in the Batcave. Besides that, this is probably the worst episode of the season now. Meltdown as Clayface make his return, where he decides to go and get revenge on the Joker, since he was the person responsible for turning him into Clayface. Thank the heavens that this episode's good. While it definitely does help that the best part of Season 1 is seeing how Ethan ended up becoming Clayface, so of course his return to get revenge on the Joker would be good. Also, holy shit, this show's bringing Hugo Strange into this as he works at the asylum? That's something I definitely didn't expect, but I really hope they develop him over time. I was worried at the start of the episode that Clayface is going to become a full-blown villain, but nah, they actually decide to show Ethan going into rehab, where Bruce hires him as a head of security at Wayne Enterprises, and it's actually the stuff I enjoy the most about the episode. We get to see how people react to him and how he wishes that he could just disappear, since he now has the reputation of being Clayface, and it's all just so well done. He even ends up struggling with becoming Clayface again as the Joker's been breaking into Wayne Industries, where of course he ends up losing and becoming Clayface forever, and I fuck with that. I kinda wish this show did more stuff like this, but unfortunately it really doesn't do much of it. Goes above Riddled, but below the Laughing Bat. Another Joker episode right after the last one? Damn, well I'm not complaining at all. But this episode has the Joker broadcasting his crimes on TV, where Detective Yin's new partner tries to take down the Joker, but ends up becoming his co-star. Yin's new partner is Joe Swanson? No way!
Sorry, partner, but Cash Tankinson always drives.
Peter, check it out, my new electric wheelchair.
Speaking about weird things I noticed, this frame of Ethan looks exactly the same as Chris Griffin where the show parodied The Shining. God, why did I notice that? Anyways, this is yet another episode that I enjoy quite a lot as well, as it's just the Joker up to his usual schemes, but I always like how we get to see the Joker use his good old laughing gas on people, as the smile that this show does on the victims is really cool but disturbing. On top of that, shit like this always works with the Joker, and Justice League's a good example of that, since the show did the same thing where the Joker broadcasts his crimes on TV, and it's just something that works well with the character. Also, they did the thing!
To find out, stay tuned. Same Joker crime, same Joker channel.
Nice little reference, but this episode goes above Riddled, but below Meltdown. Ragdolls of Riches has Batman facing off against a new villain known as Ragdoll, as well as Catwoman, and it's solid. Ragdoll's definitely an interesting character because they're quite unique to the other villains in this show because of the way they move and act, but besides that, they aren't that interesting and don't really have any kind of character or backstory. Also, we finally get Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne meeting each other for the first time, where she obviously just wants to use Bruce to find stuff to steal, but it's still quite good. With that, I didn't even notice or mention it until now, but it's such a cool design choice to have Catwoman actually have a tail, but her tail's actually her whip as it obviously moves freely when she does. It just shows that the character designs in this show are really damn good, and Catwoman is probably my favourite. I do like that both Batman and Catwoman have to work together again, as I think that they work well together, but with that I actually want to see more of Selena and Bruce, since we've seen quite a bit of Batman and Catwoman together, but I've only just started seeing Selena and Bruce talking to each other. With that, this episode goes above The Cat, the Bat, and the Very Ugly, but below Riddled.
Hello, kitty.
What the fuck? No, it ain't. Nice try. So we get yet another new villain in this show, being Spellbinder, as they have the ability to hypnotize people and give them visions, where they set their sights on the Eye of Sarkana, where they use Alfred to be their own personal thief. So they're bringing Spellbinder into this show. Interesting, but this Spellbinder ain't the GOAT. As the episode goes though, I think it starts off really well, but it just falls off from there. The start of the episode caught my attention because it starts with Alfred stealing a family heirloom of Bruce's, but it just slowly loses my interest after that. This Spellbinder is just a pretty standard villain for the show, but we do get some pretty cool visuals out of it at least. With that, the backstory's kinda cool. I like how spellbinding is a type of meditation that allows the user to use their third eye, where it gives the user the power to hypnotize people and make them hallucinate. I also like how Alfred's the only one that figures out what Spellbinder's up to and how he's hypnotizing people, because it gives his character a lot to do in this episode. Goes above Swamped, but below Fire and Ice. Okay, so this is interesting. This show's decided to show Solomon Grundy as he rises from a swamp on Halloween to wreak havoc on Gotham. Yeah, it's good. I don't know how I feel about Grundy's design though. It's alright, but I'm just used to him being fucking huge. But this time around, he's just not. Anywho, Grundy comes back from the grave for his revenge, and as he destroyed someone's house, I like this moment with the kid out trick-or-treating.
Spiffy costume.
Grundy isn't very interesting though, as he's literally just a zombie back for revenge against the descendants of Gotham's founders, but I really didn't expect it to be Clayface. That's actually kind of a cool twist. With that, the episode was originally going to be called Halloween Clayfaces, obviously because Clayface shows up. But I think it's better being titled Grundy's Night because you actually believe that it's Solomon Grundy coming back for revenge, so when you get the twist that Clayface is behind it all, it actually works really well. To add on to that, I have lost interest in Clayface as a character since all the personal and emotional struggles completely gone from his character after the last episode he appeared in, which honestly sucks. Also, Grundy does actually exist in the end? Maybe, but who knows. Goes above The Cat, the Bat, and the Very Ugly, but below Ragdolls of Riches. Strange Minds has the Joker taking Alan Yin hostage as he refuses to reveal her location, where Batman has to use a device created by Hugo Strange to get into the Joker's mind to find out where Detective Yin's being held. Oh yeah, so we're back into the good episodes now. This is honestly just another good episode because you really can't go wrong with this version of the Joker. The visuals inside the Joker's mind when Hugo taps into his mind is quite cool, and with that I actually like how half the episode takes place in the Joker's mind. Most of the stuff inside the Joker's mind follows Batman trying to find out where Detective Yin is, as he also struggles with the thought that he could possibly fail at saving her, and that stuff is the best stuff in the episode. Especially how the Joker amplifies that thought to Batman by showing him Detective Yin dying as a puppet and whatnot. It's actually fantastic. This is just a pretty damn good episode, and I like the cliffhanger we're left on with Hugo Strange, as he wants to dive into the Batman's mind as well. I'd probably put this above Meltdown, but below the Laughing Bat. The final episode of Season 2 has Joker, Penguin, and Riddler fighting each other for control of the city, as they all eventually decide to wager their part of the city by saying that they will give up their parts of Gotham to one another if they can capture Batman and reveal his identity. Damn, this is pretty good. It's great to finally see some of Batman's villains working together to put a stop to Batman, and it's something we haven't gotten much of in this show so far. Also, Commissioner Gordon's actually in this show? Well, alright. I just hope we get more development on his character in the future, because this is the first time I've seen him. I will say, I really didn't expect the Chief to catch on to Detective Yin working with Batman, but it's actually a pretty damn good surprise, as the police then try to sabotage Batman's plans to talk to Detective Yin in person. Also, I like how Batman kind of has a Michael Keaton moment going on when showing himself to the villains, as he tells them to come and get him if they want him.
You want me? Here I am.
This episode is just good overall, and I also really like that Commissioner Gordon is the one that managed to get Detective Yin back in the police force, as she actually helped capture Joker, Riddler, and the Penguin, and oh shit, that ending is good. So we're really going to get the good old Commissioner Gordon in this show, as he decides to work with Batman so the police can get better press, and to make Gotham a safer place. Well, with that, let's wrap this season up. Just another solid season of the show. Yeah, I gotta say, Season 2 is just of pretty similar quality to the first season, since the first season was just consistently solid, but this season I feel like has higher highs, but some of the episodes in this season are just pretty average. This season really started to shine with the last few episodes, where we started to see some new things for the show, and even bring in some old faces that will definitely add a lot more to this show's future. Episodes like Pets and Swamps weren't that good, but we also get some actual bangers like The Laughing Bat, Night in the City, and Strange Minds. At least in this season, it feels like we're working towards something bigger happening in this show, and we actually get to see some bigger scale episodes anyways, and especially that last episode. I'm really surprised that we didn't get an episode of villains teaming up sooner. But with that, I feel like Fire and Ice was the weaker example of that when you compare it to Night in the City, where Batman's 3 biggest villains decided to work together for their own selfish wants. You know what though? I don't really have much else to say about this season besides from it just being solid overall like the last one. Since I'm more of a movie person though, let's take a break from talking about the episodes of the show, since a movie based on this show decided to release in between this season's ending and season 3 starting. And of course, that movie is... So yeah, let's actually talk about this movie that a lot of people have forgotten about. But before that, you can actually check out my full commentary track on the movie over on my Patreon for as little as $2 a month. I have other commentary tracks that I do once a week that are available for $5 a month, so make sure to check it out. Should be up there somewhere, should be linked in the description. Check it out. Anywho, as the title of the movie suggests, Batman has to take on Dracula himself after the Penguin unintentionally brought Dracula back to life, and this movie's quite good though, and it definitely has the sauce. One thing I want to say straight away is that this movie just feels like an extended episode of the show, and I feel like that's both a good and a bad thing. It's good because it's consistent to the tone of what the show does with the characters, themes, etc., but I feel like it's also a bad thing because as a movie, it definitely feels like a straight-to-DVD movie. Which yeah, it's a straight-to-DVD movie, so makes sense. But compare that to movies like Mask of the Phantasm, Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, and shit, even Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. You can tell that this movie was given quite a small budget for an animated movie. It doesn't help that Batman Mystery of the Batwoman released 2 years before this, because not many people watched it and still haven't watched it. It does make sense on a business standpoint, since the Batman animated movies made less and less money with each subsequent release, but you feel that lack of budget here. The movie feels like it could have been massive in scale, but it really isn't that big when you consider the characters that show up in this movie. Sure, you still have the well-known Batman villains like the Penguin and the Joker in this movie, but it's really odd to go from the end of season 2 to this, since Commissioner Gordon was set up in the last episode of that season. With that, the only kind of police that show up in this movie are no-name SWAT men as they want to stop Batman. So we don't get to see Detective Alan Yin, Chief Rojas, or anyone like that in this movie, and it's quite strange. Shit, we don't even get to see the Kabuki twins at all in this movie, which is really odd since they've showed up in every episode the Penguin does. Anyways, I should definitely talk about things I like about this movie since I still enjoyed it overall. I really like how the movie decided to keep the plot straight and simple since they could make a Batman and Dracula movie convoluted, but keeping it straight and simple makes it much easier to follow. With that, all the stuff with Dracula is pretty damn cool, since you can really tell that the creators behind this movie really took a lot of inspiration from the 1931 Dracula movie, from how he looks, how he acts, and even what he does in this movie. With that, the climax where Batman manages to beat Dracula always goes hard, and it's the one clip in this movie that always pops up on Twitter at some point and gains traction once a year. Another thing I really like about this movie is how they make the Joker a vampire later on, even though personally I think it could have been used a bit more, since we only get one scene of the Joker attacking Batman as a vampire, and then he ends up getting held captive until he gets cured. Honestly think that a Batman vs Dracula movie could only really work in this universe, since I feel like this show leans a lot more into the gothic nature of Batman and his world here, more than any other Batman show or movie out there. It just works really well here, and Dracula never feels out of place. With that, finally we have something involving the show where they actually have a villain being a supernatural being, since they pulled a fake out in the episode Grundy's Night. Also, we actually get to see some blood in this show's universe, since characters like the Penguin actually bleed. That's cool. With that, they made it rain blood at the blood bank. One last thing I'll mention is that we get to see some really cool dream sequences and flashbacks, but I also really like the visuals of when Dracula uses his mind control on someone, as their eyes change to red when being mind controlled. What else is there to say? Go watch the movie, it's good. Anyways, let's get into season 3 with... Well damn, that feels really quick to go from developing Commissioner Gordon in the last episode to now developing Batgirl. Well, funny that I mentioned that, since this show actually wanted to bring in and develop Robin first, but Warner Bros. Being Warner Bros. Decided that they can't have more than one Robin at the same time, since Teen Titans was still airing at the time that this show's third season came out. Which makes no sense to me, since Batman's allowed to have more than one adaptation at a time, but Robin? Nah, not allowed. Anywho, the episode obviously has Barbara Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's daughter, deciding to do what Batman does by following in his footsteps to eventually become Batgirl, and it's actually good. Yeah, I enjoyed this episode quite a bit, and also in this episode we get the first appearance of Poison Ivy in the show, and they decided to age her down. I think it's because this show wanted someone around Batgirl's age for them to face off against, which yeah, it makes sense, but it's a little weird. Anywho, this episode starts with us actually seeing Batgirl as she has to help Batman with Poison Ivy, and they really changed the intro. It's cool and all, but I don't think this music fits with the tone of the Batman show. I know it's just a different version of the 1966 theme, but it just doesn't fit the gothic nature of the show at all. Really, we also get a I know you're wondering how I got into this situation kind of shtick in this episode, where we have to go and backpedal to see how Batgirl came to be, and how the characters got caught up with Poison Ivy the way they did. It's a bit interesting to make Barbara and Pamela school friends where they originally did things to help the environment, as Pamela takes it to another extreme, and even to the point where she's using a muscle for hire to do what she wants. I definitely didn't expect her to be the one that hired Temblor, but it's neat. Also, is this Barbara's eye color meant to be red or brown? I swear it changes depending on if she's in the light or not, and it's really odd. At least we get to see how Temblor accidentally made Poison Ivy, but since this is a two-parter, we don't obviously get to see all of it. With that, it's not a bad start to the season, so how about we continue it with... So, of course, we continue what happened in the last episode, as we actually start to see Pamela turning into Poison Ivy, and how Barbara decides to become Batman's protege, as Poison Ivy wants to take out Gotham's polluters. Just as good as the last episode. One thing I didn't say in the last episode is that I'm honestly just not a big fan of Barbara's character in the show. She ain't bad at all, but she comes off as a bit annoying. Well, we've definitely seen much worse adaptations of the character. Anywho, I quite like how Pamela's transformation is shown in the show. It's actually quite cool. With that though, Poison Ivy as a character is kind of just standard Poison Ivy. Nothing really sticks out at all, but she's just doing the usual by taking down Gotham's polluters, and doesn't have an interesting personality since her saving plants is just her personality. Honestly, the best moment in this episode is how Batman knows that it's Barbara straight away. It actually caught me off guard, but it's pretty good. Also, I love how Alfred can be a bit of a smartass sometimes. It's definitely one thing that this show does well with Alfred and Bruce's relationship, and we see that when Batman tells him about Batgirl.
Perhaps I should equip the Batcave with a doggy door, should Bat Hound decide to join the gang.
It's probably a little better than the last episode. A Dark Knight to Remember follows Bruce as he gets kidnapped by the Penguin, after Bruce got amnesia and forgot he was Batman, as Batgirl has to come in and save him. Yeah, it's alright. I will say, I think it's neat to see Bruce actually being a billionaire playboy, since we actually haven't seen much of it before, but I'm just not a fan of amnesia-filled plots. At least Barbara gets something to do in this episode with Batman out of the picture, but it makes me wonder. What's happened with Detective Alan Yin and Chief Rojas? Did they just disappear all of a sudden? I thought it was odd enough in the Batman vs. Dracula, but now the two of them being completely gone from the show is extremely strange considering how much their characters were developed in the last two seasons. This show felt different in the first two seasons, but I feel like the show's starting to feel like a typical Batman show, which is good and bad. I think they could have balanced both of these things, but I guess they didn't bother. I still like what this show does though, especially how Alfred's the one that has to help Bruce become Batman again and remind him of why he does it in the first place. It's some good stuff. As the rest of the episode goes though, there isn't much to say, it's just alright. Goes at the bottom of the season. This episode has the ventriloquist completing his treatment at Arkham, where he also struggles to escape from his memory of Scarface. Damn, these episodes are kinda just falling off, aren't they? This is still an alright episode, but I'm noticing that these episodes are kinda getting worse as the season goes along. Anywho, I wonder how Scarface came back since he was completely fucked up the last time we saw him, but now the puppet's just all good. Did someone make it for him or... Wait, we don't get the answers? Yeah, thought so. I like how Hugo's the one that helps Arnold in Arkham, but I will say that I wish we got to see him struggle a bit more in Arkham. All we get is the setup and then a time skip to Arnold getting out of Arkham. The whole episode's very similar to the new Batman Adventures episode Double Talk, but this episode also adds Hugo as a potential villain, as he ends up giving Scarface back to Arnold, which makes him go back to a life of crime. This episode isn't as good as that because I feel like Arnold's descent feels extremely rushed, and it definitely needed a bit more time to be fleshed out in this episode. With that, This moment on Arnold's old show set is hilariously stupid because the train comes at what feels like a meter a minute, but honestly, this episode's at the bottom. RPM has another villain called Gearhead coming to Gotham, as they can take control of the cars with their nanotech, as they decide to go out and commit crimes for the thrill of it. Pretty similar to the last episode in regards to quality. I want to get this out of the way. This villain sucks. Everything from the design to the voice to how the character acts is honestly quite annoying, and I hate to say it, but it's kinda cringe. Also, hell yeah, the toy Batmobile got trashed, but the new one just looks relatively the same. It does look a little better because they take a bit of inspiration from the BTAS design, but it still looks very similar to what they did before, and what I mean about it is that it still looks like it was made to be a toy first. I was honestly really bored watching this episode, as the villain is what really weighed down this episode a lot because he just sucks. Definitely goes at the bottom. This episode has the Joker going full Batman Arkham Asylum as he decides to use Bane's venom to mess with the city, as both Batman and Batgirl have to stop him. Okay, this is a little better. It's kinda neat to see the Joker use Bane's venom as it's something different for the character at this time, but hey, maybe Arkham Asylum got inspired by this to make the Joker use the Titan Serum in that game. Probably not. But even though I actually like the Joker stuff in this episode, I could care less about Barbara's subplot, as she wants to be stronger. It's just really not interesting. With that, why does the Joker keep the same costume that he put on at the circus throughout the whole episode? You would think that he would change into his usual attire, but apparently not. Also, hey, the big Batsuit comes back again. That's neat. It does suck that Batgirl gets her ass kicked until going for the Joker for a second time in it, but I guess they had to do something a little bit different with the suit. To be completely honest, if these episodes keep going this way, then I reckon that this season will be the weakest so far. Goes above a fistful of felt, but below a Dark Knight to remember. So we get to see Catwoman again in this episode, as she has to have an alliance with both Batman and Batgirl to save two leopards, which were stolen by the Joker. Alright, okay. I see that these episodes are starting to get a bit better in quality, but this one's alright. It's just your average Batman episode. There's nothing that really stood out as amazing in this episode, but there wasn't anything I didn't particularly dislike either. Actually no, I do like how Batman and Catwoman work off each other yet again, but besides that, there just isn't much to say. Also, the Joker gets two hyenas? Cool, I guess, but I do like how the Joker tries to make them eat Catwoman, but they don't because she's obviously good with cats, and hyenas are mostly like cats and not dogs, like what the Joker thinks. I will say it's kind of odd having the Joker being the main villain for 2 episodes in a row, but I definitely don't mind it. It happened before. Goes above Brawn, but below a Dark Knight to remember. Fleurs de Mal has Batman investigating Gotham's politicians, as they've all of a sudden dropped plans to build a new hospital in favour of preserving Gotham's green areas, and this is just pretty average. It's just extremely average, and I don't find Poison Ivy or her schemes that interesting. For that matter, Poison Ivy is just a pretty average character in everything anyways. It's just your usual shtick where Poison Ivy uses Gotham's political figures to keep doing what she does, but I will say one thing that is cool, and that is that Poison Ivy uses her plans to impersonate those people to pass laws that work in her favour. That's one cool and interesting thing that this show's done with the character, but besides that one neat idea, it's just the same old stuff. Actually, we do get to see Batman punching an old woman.
Oh, are you here for some...
Anyways, I actually enjoyed this episode more before Ivy actually showed up in the flesh, but this episode goes above RPM, but below a fistful of felt. Alright, so we have another episode which introduces yet another villain, being Toymaker, as he seeks revenge on Bruce Wayne after he succeeds in his campaign to remove unsafe toys from store shelves. Alright, I wonder if MJF can answer this one for me. Thank you. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like no version of Toyman can even compete with Superman the Animated Series' version. To me, that's just a great version of the character, but this is okay. Basically, this time around, Toyman's the owner of a toy company called Crank Co., as Bruce used examples from his company to get the unsafe toys banned. Also, what's with Patton Oswalt showing up in these Batman animated shows? He voiced the character in arguably the worst episode of Batman Beyond, and now he's Toyman in this show. Speaking about characters showing back up, Joe Swanson, Cash Tankinson, is back yet again, which is cool, but I'll say it again, it's weird that he's back again, but Detective Alan Yin and Chief Rojas are gone. I will say the best part by far in this episode is the stuff with Cash and Bruce, is they actually work really well off each other, and you gotta love Cash as a character. He's goofy as hell, but he's fun. Looking at the score of this episode on IMDb, it got me worried that this was going to be an episode I really didn't like at all. But honestly, the one thing that really weighs this episode down is Toyman. I actually like the rest of the stuff in this episode. I think the more silly tone of this show really works with Cash because he's basically just a massive cliche. Goes above the laughing cats, but below a Dark Knight to remember.
Hey, Friday!
The Apprentice has the Joker trying to find his own sidekick by trying to mold one out of a young prankster, as he's jealous that Batman has his own sidekick. Finally, an actual good episode. I really like how we actually set up in this episode the fact that the Joker's jealous of Batman when Batman and Batgirl take him down at the start of the episode. They managed to show to us quite well why he wants a sidekick. With that, after failing, I love this moment.
I want one too. You two don't count.
So the Joker ends up picking a prankster from Barbara's class named Donnie, and I literally thought that it was Seth Green, but no, it's Michael Rees. I hope I said that right. Who's actually done a lot of voice work, and even voiced Kevin and Ben 10. Oh, so that's where I know the voice from, even though I didn't really watch Ben 10 at all. Anywho, it's quite neat to see the Joker manipulate Donnie into becoming his apprentice by showing him that all he wants to do is prank Gotham to make them all smile. Of course, he stops working for the Joker when realizing that he wants to hurt people, but this is honestly just an enjoyable episode start to finish. Probably the best episode in this season because this is the only episode I've really enjoyed in this season so far. Thunder has yet another new villain in Gotham, Maximilian Zeus, taking control of Gotham in a ship that hovers over the city. Well, I really didn't expect this show to have Maximilian in it, but it's alright. Speaking about not expecting things, Phil Lamar voices him? Well, that's pretty cool, and I really like his vocal performance, but the line Zeus has are so basic and stereotypical that it kinda sucks. With that though, we get yet another Batman gadget, and this time it's the Batwing, and damn, this design ain't good at all. My issue I have with the modes of transport that Batman has in this show is that they're designed to look like a toy first. They're not really designed to fit the style or tone in this show, and that sucks, but WB's gotta make money, I guess, so, I don't know. I just don't have too much to say about this episode, but goddamn, it took that long for Batman to let Batgirl in as his actual partner and keep her in the loop. 11 episodes of the same thing between Batman and Batgirl. Well, actually 9 because the first 2 develop her origin, but my problem is that their dynamic doesn't change at all in the 9 episodes until now, where Batgirl's finally accepted as his partner. This is definitely one of the better episodes of the season though, because Zeus is actually a big threat to Gotham, so it goes above Batgirl Begins Part 2, but below The Apprentice. This episode has the Penguin, Mr. Freeze, and Alfred's old school friend named Ewan using an umbrella to find some old stolen valuable treasure, and this episode's just enjoyable overall. It's kind of a goofy episode in premise and execution, but just seeing 2 of Batman's villains do something goofy like this is actually quite fun. There's nothing that stands out as amazing to me in this episode, but I will say that Ewan's a really annoying character. I kinda wish that he wasn't in the episode at all. It's kinda cool that they connect the stolen treasure back to the Cobblepots, but besides that, there isn't really anything worth noting about this episode, besides the fact that it doesn't take itself that seriously, and I kinda like it for that. Goes above Thunder, but below The Apprentice. Alright, so the final episode of Season 3 has a computer program known as DAVE, which stands for Digitally Advanced Villain Emulator, combining the psychological profiles of criminals in Arkham Asylum to become a villain themselves. God damn, this is a good episode, and even though it reminds me of Hardak and Batman the Animated Series, this is actually better. I literally didn't even have much to say when watching the episode when doing my commentary over on my Patreon, which you can check out my commentary tracks for $5 a month over there. Make sure to check it out, links in the description. Because I was just taking it all in and enjoying it. I like how they actually use Hugo Strange in a meaningful way, where he creates Batman's biggest threat, and they definitely didn't skimp out on showing us how big of a threat Dave can actually be. I love how he puts Gotham into a blackout and manages to defeat Batman 3 times before he manages to come out on top, where he was also about to reveal the Batman's identity to everyone in Gotham. Also, let me get it out of the way. The new design that Dave has when he takes on a new form goes so fucking hard. Yeah, this shit looks so nice, but with that, I really like the robotic voice that the character's given. I couldn't figure out exactly whose voice it was when watching it, but damn, it's Johnny Bravo himself, Jeff Bennett. He actually did the voice for Ragdoll in the episode Ragdoll to Riches, and even did the voice for Hardak and B-Taz, which is kind of funny because I mentioned that Dave's a lot like Hardak. But if I was to name everything he did voice work for, I would be here for days. With that though, this episode's at the top. I hate to say it, but this is the worst season so far. I'm not saying that it's bad at all, because it isn't, but as an overall package goes, this is just worse than the other two. It starts off alright with the Batgirl Begins two-parter, but it really goes up and down from there. The one thing I want to mention that really threw me off for the first few episodes in this season is how it's much lighter in tone. Yeah, so between seasons 2 and 3, they decided to make this show quite a bit lighter in tone, and not really have many serious episodes anymore, which kinda sucks because I liked how the first 2 seasons are mostly serious, but still sprinkled in some lighthearted stuff here and there. With that though, I really don't like how they just ditched Detective Alan Yin and Chief Rojas. We spent the first 2 seasons getting to know and understand these characters, just to ditch them for the staple Batman characters. I think this would have worked better if they just maybe sidelined the characters a little bit, but still had them show up here and there. But on top of that, I felt like Batgirl was the replacement for Alan. When you think about it, they both play that sort of sidekick role to Batman. But if you ask me which one I prefer, I would definitely lean towards Alan. No, not that Alan. Ugh. I still find it strange that they didn't use Robin, but WB are weird like that, so they only allowed them to use the character after Teen Titans finished. I will say though, when this show gets good, it gets really good. The big surprise for me with this season is how much I enjoyed its final episode. Gotham's ultimate criminal mastermind was a lot like some of the episodes in the first 2 seasons with its more serious tone, and that's what I really liked about it because it takes its villains really seriously and shows how big of a threat they can be in a well done way. To be negative though, when this show has an average episode, they're some of the worst episodes so far. Obviously the main example's RPM because damn, that was just so boring, and I found Gearhead to be really annoying. I do hope that season 4 manages to be a bit more serious in this season because that's what I really enjoy this show is when it gets a bit more serious. With that though, let's get into season 4 with... Well shit, I just mentioned Robin not being in the show for them to now introduce Dick Grayson into this universe, where Bruce tries to help him capture a crime boss who's responsible for killing his family. Well, I guess Teen Titans ended at the start of 2006 and this came out later the same year, so WB let them have the character in the show now, and this is a good episode. I want to mention one thing first. I love it when Batman shows use voice actors from previous adaptations of the character as other characters in a new Batman universe, because Kevin Conroy is Dick's dad John, and Mark Hamill is Tony Zuko. I absolutely love that. With that, they slightly changed Dick's backstory to having the Graysons have issues with Tony Zuko and his men before they fall to their death at the circus that night, because Tony took out a few screws out of their equipment. I will say that the tension that they build up with their deaths is actually really well done, as we see the ropes about to come out. My favourite thing about this episode is all the character stuff we get, especially with Dick and Bruce. Obviously the stuff where Dick is grieving and then becoming Bruce's adopted son is great, but I really like how Bruce so badly wants justice to be served on Zuko, because he doesn't want what happened to him to happen to Dick as well, since Bruce's parents' killer was never brought to justice. Of course Dick ends up finding out that Bruce is Batman after catching Alfred coming out of a secret entrance, but I love how Bruce actually tells Dick what he's doing, as he doesn't want Dick's childhood to be consumed by revenge like his was. He isn't Robin in this episode for very long, but I do like how he actually saves Tony Zuko from falling to his death as he tripped and fell, which is quite cool. Well damn, if the episodes in this season keep going this way, we might have the best season of the show on our hands. So you know what? This episode's been really good, so let's get into the next one. Team Penguin has, well, the Penguin, as he assembles a team of villains to take down Batman, as we also get to see Batgirl and Robin trying to work together as they meet for the first time. This isn't as good, but it's better than almost every episode in last season. I find it kind of funny that this episode starts with the Penguin casually watching a movie at the cinemas, where he gets the idea to put a team together to stop Batman. It's just funny that most of the people don't really care that the Penguin's there, besides the couple that the Penguin threatens behind them. Also, Bane's back in this episode? We haven't seen him since the second episode of the show, but he just gets his ass handed to him in 2 seconds. Speaking about faces we haven't seen in ages, we get Killer Croc, Firefly and Ragdoll in this episode, and even a new villain, Killer Moth. It's funny how he gets treated like a joke and is only in Team Penguin just to pour their penguin his coffee, until he ends up getting affected by the chemicals they stole, where he becomes a giant moth, and the Penguin decides to ditch the others just to work with Killer Moth. I will say, the feud between Batgirl and Robin's kinda just there for a bit of drama, but I'm not a fan of it. I do like how Batman finally shows Barbara his identity, where she was obviously originally right, but this moment's funny.
And you are?
Sorry. As a not quite official freelancer, I have to go the extra mile to protect my privacy.
She's Barbara Gordon.
Also, what happened to the gadgets that Batman gave Batgirl? Did he just decide that she didn't deserve it and wanted them back? Or did she just not want them? Who knows? This is just a fun and enjoyable episode. It isn't as good as the last one, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. We get to see Clayface come back in the show as he turns himself into the police, promising to them that he will give up his criminal past as a new villain comes to Gotham, where Clayface sees this as the perfect opportunity to redeem themselves. Okay, this is still good yet again, but it's not as good as the other episodes. I love how this episode starts with Joker's two henchmen actually talking as they say that the Joker's plan stinks, but the reveal that it's actually Clayface's name. With that, I really didn't expect Basil Karlo in this episode at all, as he of course becomes Clayface as well, since Basil's probably the most well-known Clayface there is. They even used Basil in the recent Batman show, Batman Caped Crusader. I do really like that we get Ethan back in this show, because Clayface really isn't interesting without Ethan as a personality inside of him, so having him back really brings a lot back to the character. Even though we now have a new Clayface, I'm not a fan of Basil as a character. He gets kind of irritating in this show, but he basically turns into Clayface just for the attention. He really just weighs down this episode because the stuff with Bennett is good and seeing how he wants to use his powers for something besides villainy is great. Also, apparently Basil isn't actually completely cured in the end, which yeah, of course that's the case. This episode just isn't as good as the others. The Everywhere Man has Bruce trying to help out a close friend of his, as they've been framed for some robberies by a villain that can alter their appearance. God damn, this season started better than any of the other seasons in the show, because this episode's good too. I thought it would be Clayface again, but it's actually Markiplier committing the crimes. Jokes aside, even though all the signs are pointing towards his close friend named John Marlowe, it ends up actually being him, but it's actually not, since it's apparently a clone of him that went rogue, and the clone decided to use a cloning device to clone the clone and become the Everywhere Man. Just feel like I said clone 800 times in that one sentence. I really like how Batman manages to manipulate the clones to make them turn on the original clone, which obviously becomes their downfall. I don't have too much to say about this episode, besides from it just being solid overall. Goes above Clayface's, but below Team Penguin. This episode has Black Mask's henchman break him out of GCPD, so he can activate his Doomsday device, and this is just really fucking cool. I also love how this show decides to actually use Black Mask, since at the time this came out, barely anyone knew who he was. With that, the design goes so fucking hard. Not a big fan of the voice, but the design makes up for it. It's kind of funny that Robin and Batgirl complain about them getting the smaller missions, but it's mainly funny because we get this moment with Batman.
If it's so important, you can do escort and we'll save the city.
Then you know how to deactivate an electromagnetic shockwave generator?
I like how Black Mask actually fails to escape at first, since Robin and Batgirl manage to stop the gas and put him in a cell, but end up having to face Black Mask's army of men that are coming in to get him. Speaking about Black Mask, I like how he tries to get into their heads by saying that Batman's the only real threat to his plan, but throughout the episode both Robin and Batgirl show their worth by stopping Black Mask and his men, but of course Batman managed to stop the bomb just as it was about to explode. This episode just shows why Batgirl and Robin are useful in quite a well done way, and the end joke is great.
And you guys are pretty good at grunt work. Now who wants to wash the Batmobile?
Goes above Team Penguin, but below A Matter of Family. Strange New World has Batman on a race to find an antidote to Hugo Strange's toxin that has turned everyone in Gotham into zombies. And holy shit, this is the best episode yet. Just straight off the bat, this shit is awesome. I love how this episode starts with seeing how a completely destroyed looking Gotham looks, as Batman has all the antidotes ready to go, as Batgirl and Robin as zombies try to stop him. What a way to get you interested in what's going to happen in this episode, and it makes us wonder who made everyone zombies and how it happened, as the rest of the episode sets all of that up. We get our answers pretty quickly since Hugo Strange is behind it all, but I love how this episode completely misdirects us just to pull the rug from underneath us at the end. This episode has a ticking time bomb thing going on, because if Batman doesn't cure them all in 48 hours, they will stay zombies forever. With that, it's neat to see how Bruce's appearance changes throughout the episode, as he doesn't rest, sleep, or worry about his own hygiene when trying to save Gotham. This whole episode is just fantastic because the whole time we focus on Batman's point of view, as he obviously sees and thinks that everyone's zombies, since he was affected by Strange's toxin. The reveal at the end where Batman connects the dots as to what's actually happening is just so damn good. There's actually quite a few signs throughout the episode that Hugo Strange is lying about what he's saying, which is something you don't really notice until the reveal at the end, where Hugo was actually making Batman spread the toxin throughout Gotham. What else can I say about this episode? It's honestly fantastic start to finish, so let's get into the next one. This episode does something completely different by showing us that 1,000 years from now, Gotham is being terrorized by a villain from its past, as they must find a way to defend themselves without the help of Batman. What the hell is going on in this season? They've just been cooking so far. Yeah, this is yet another really good episode. It's cool that this episode has people finding the Batcave, but from there it's a surprise to see that this episode doesn't even have flashbacks to the normal Batman that we've been following, but instead the same Batman in 2027, where it's basically the Dark Knight Returns, but a bit different. Ironically, when we flash back to Batman's final day as Batman, where he has to deal with Mr. Freeze. Also, goddamn, why do the character designs always go so hard in this show? I love this Dark Knight Returns inspired style Batman, as it's a mix between that and the new Batman Adventures, and it looks fantastic. With that, of course the flashback stuff is the most interesting part of this episode, but I still do like the stuff that takes place in the future, because it's interesting to see how they find out about Batman and his identity and whatnot, because apparently all of that had been lost to time. Wait, in 2027, Alan Yin becomes the commissioner, and Ethan Bennett becomes the chief? Apparently so, but it would still be cool to see them show up, but they don't. It's also pretty cool to see that Mr. Freeze actually froze himself so someone would wake him up in a future without Batman, hence why he's here 1,000 years in the future. I do find it a bit weird that Batman managed to put all of the computer's data into the titanium support beams in binary code, but I guess the people in the future had to find a way to stop him somehow. Still really damn good, so it goes above the breakout, but below a matter of family. So this episode follows the Joker, as he takes interest in the TV show host who's also a psychologist, Harleen Quinzel, as he decides to make her his new partner in crime. Alright, so this is different for the character, but I really like the episode. I will say that it definitely helps that Paul Dini actually wrote this episode, because he's the one man that understands Batman and his rogues gallery more than anyone. It also helps that he created Harley Quinn and Batman the Animated Series. I could go into a tangent on how I think Paul Dini is the one man responsible for making Harley what she is, but I'll leave that for another time. I like how they don't go for an interpretation of the character that is exactly the same as BTAS, instead they do something a bit different with it, but making the Joker and Harley be in an actual loving relationship with each other. I think it actually works well, and with that, they actually make her out to be a bit nuts before she even meets the Joker, but wait, is that Starfire from Teen Titans and Ace from Justice League and Justice League Unlimited? Well, it actually is, as Hynden Walsh voices Harley in this show. They also do something different with the Joker as a character, as he's actually a big fan of her show and starts off by wanting to help her, where they manage to hit it off with each other when going out for a night in Gotham. Of course, the Joker still does it for selfish needs, but to see him look like he actually cares is interesting. Goes above the breakout but below artifacts. Seconds has an ordinary criminal get the ability to travel back in time by several seconds, as Batman now has to try and take them down, even when they know his every move before he even does it. That's actually a really neat idea for a villain's power, and yeah, yet again, this episode's good. It just blows my mind that every episode of this season has been at least good. Like, what the hell happened between the last season and this one? Anywho, this episode's just really enjoyable, as it's interesting to just have some ordinary looking guy being an actual threat to Batman. I will say, it's kind of funny to see Francis get his ass kicked time and time again until he actually gets it right and beats Batman. With that, I love how Batman manages to figure out Francis's power the second time running into him, as he had a feeling of deja vu, and somehow even knew exactly what Francis was going to say. He basically wants revenge for Gotham locking him up after stealing a watch, as he feels like he was wrongfully sentenced 17 years for a mistake, and I quite like it. This whole episode isn't too serious, but I still enjoy it because it's honestly just fun start to finish. Last thing I want to mention is that it's really cool to see Batman use his deja vu to his advantage to try and take down Francis, but ultimately Francis's son gets used against him, where he manages to go back 18 years and not steal the watch. Actually, I like the ending where Francis and his son have their own company where they repair clocks, as they end up fixing Bruce's grandfather clock. Goes above the breakout but below two of a kind. Okay, so we finally get the Riddler back in this show as Batman finds out how he played a role in the Riddler's origin, as he tries to save both of them from a certain death at the bottom of the ocean. This is definitely one of the weaker episodes in this season, but you know what? It's still good. So I will start off by saying that I'm glad that we get more of the Riddler, and how we actually get to see what made him do what he does. It's neat to see that he was originally doing what he does for good intentions, as he wanted to help people remember more things, but it ends up going wrong as the device goes haywire, where he descended into becoming the Riddler. We actually get to see how the Riddler's first victim was Gorman, who apparently wanted to take Eddie's invention to make money off them, where of course Batman stopped him. And now the situation Batman is in is with both Gorman and the Riddler, as he says that this will be his last time as the Riddler. I will say, I thought that the first time we see the Riddler in this show is the first time Batman ever meets the Riddler since they act that way, but apparently not. Even with that aside, it's interesting to see Batman deal with the Riddler for the first time. The best part of this episode is that Julie, Eddie's partner, actually sabotaged his project, not Gorman like he thought, which was a neat little twist, as how would a businessman like Gorman meant to know how to sabotage his project? Also, that's a cool detail how the Riddler's tear goes in the shape of a question mark. Goes above the breakout but below seconds. Rumors has a vigilante named, well, Rumor, as he plans on getting rid of every criminal in Gotham once and for all. It's a solid episode. This is definitely weaker than most of the episodes in this season so far, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. Rumor is a cool and interesting villain in the first half, until it's revealed to be Paul Karen, but no, they decide to make it a fake out where it's actually revealed that Rumor is his bodyguard named Mario, even though he hasn't developed at all as a character in the episode before being revealed to be Rumor. It just makes more sense for it to be Paul, even though he's in a wheelchair, as he has the motivation to want to take down the villains, but Mario just wants to do it just because of what happened to Paul, and to make sure that none of the villains can hurt anyone again. It's alright, but I do like this episode for bringing all of Batman's villains, even the more obscure ones into this show, all in one room together. It's funny that, only 5 of them have voice lines? With that, I like how Mario's voice is literally just Ron Perlman's Slade voice, and of course, it's voiced by Ron Perlman himself. Goes above the Everywhere Man, but below Team Penguin. Alright, so the final 2 episodes of Season 4 is a 2-parter, where this first part has John Jones, a new officer in Gotham, claiming to know Batman's true identity, as Batman has to find out if he can trust him as an ally or not. I enjoy this episode quite a bit. The only real problem I have with it is that I feel like this show is going to become more of a Justice League show, when realistically this show should just stay focused on Batman. Even with that, I like how John and Batman work off each other in this episode. They actually work quite nicely, and I like the conversations they have with each other. I do really like how Batman starts to contemplate if he even needs help throughout the episode, because it gives his character a bit of a dynamic for this 2-parter, and it's obviously something that he will have to end up overcoming in the next part. I don't really have much else to say, but I still enjoy this episode for what it is. Goes above Rumors, but below Team Penguin. The final episode of Season 4 has Batman and John trying to deal with the alien invasion, and when failing, Batman realizes that even he needs to rely on some help sometimes. This is much better than the last part, but I think it's good. Yeah, I just really enjoy this episode, especially how Batman has to learn to accept help when he needs it, with Batgirl and Robin, but also John. With that, I actually like how they established the Justice League at the end of this episode, with Batman knowing all about it and hacking into their systems, when John takes him there and tells him about them. Another thing I like quite a bit, which isn't actually in the episode for that long, is how the GCPD and Gotham's villains actually help each other out with the alien invaders. It's just different, but I really like it. Especially that little nod between Gordon and Mr. Freeze. My main problem with these 2 parts is that the aliens known as the Joining are just faceless aliens that want to destroy the planet after getting the things they want. They don't have any kind of interesting personalities at all, and are extremely basic. With that, it goes above the breakout, but below Riddler's Revenge. Hot damn, this season is good. This is by far the best season of the show so far. This season really just had banger after banger, and was much more consistent than any other seasons. With that, I feel like this season brought back more of a serious tone overall, but still had moments where these episodes were a bit lighthearted and silly, and this time around I think the balance is good. I think that the show's actually better with Robin in the show, even though Dick can get a bit annoying from time to time. Sure, he can get a bit annoying, but there are moments in this season where Dick and Bruce work well with each other, even with Barbara. With that, the first episode, A Matter of Family, is great, where they show us Dick's origin story and how he became Robin. From there, the show just keeps up the consistency, with every episode at least being really solid, and some episodes such as Strange New World are genuinely really good. I actually love this episode because it's the most serious so far, and the twist that Batman was being affected by Strange's toxin was so well done. Honestly, don't see any other episode of this show topping what Strange New World did, but even if they don't, we still have other really good episodes in this season, such as Artifacts, and as I mentioned before, A Matter of Family. One last thing I want to say about this season is that I'm surprised with how many villains show back up in this season again. It was really just a big surprise to see people like Bane, Killer Croc, and Ragdoll show up again. And with that, we also get new villains that I enjoy quite a bit in episodes like Seconds, The Breakout, and Two of a Kind. I know the show has more Justice League members in the show in the last season, but I still hope that they manage to keep the focus on the Bat family more. That's what this show excels at, but I don't want to waste any more time. Let's just start off Season 5 with... Right off the bat, we're starting off with a two-parter, as Lex decides to team up with the villains of Gotham for a scheme in Metropolis, where Lex wants to control Superman. Okay, well we're starting off strong yet again, because this is good. I love that this show didn't even bother using different voice actors for Superman, Lex, and even Lois Lane, as George Newbern, Clancy Brown, and Dana Delaney are back to portray their roles. It's like they all knew how good they were as the characters, so they just decided, fuck it, make them those characters again, just do it. Which is fair, because they're all fantastic in their respective roles. Anyways, I always like when both Batman and Superman have to work together in a world's finest situation. It's just always neat to see Batman and Superman having to work together. With that, I really didn't expect Metallo to be in this episode, but he gets his ass kicked not too long after he shows up, as Batman and Robin manage to get the kryptonite out of Metallo. I always like how Batman finds out Superman's identity, and this show does it differently, but it still shows how good of a detective Batman is, as he tracks Superman's flight patterns to find out that he's Clark. Speaking about Batman and Superman, it's interesting seeing Batman being the one trying to get Superman into the Justice League, since Batman's learned to work with others, but Superman isn't quite at that stage yet. The ending of this episode's pretty damn cool though, where Lex used poison ivy to get plant spores that could potentially put him under mind control. It actually does. This is just an enjoyable episode. Not much else to say. The second part follows right where we left off, as both Batman and Robin have to go and save Superman from the mind control that Lex put him under. This is just as enjoyable as the last episode. Yeah, this episode's just really more of the same stuff we got in the first part, and you definitely can't go wrong with that. I love how Lex thinks that he's the hero in this situation just because he wants humans to protect themselves, and thinks that they shouldn't have to rely on aliens to help them against alien invaders. With that, when Lex puts Superman on Batman, I love how Batman just puts kryptonite down his shirt. It's quite funny, but hey, it's effective. Half the episode is literally just the two of them fighting, which I can't really complain about because it's neat to see the two trying to beat the shit out of each other. I do really like this joke after Robin blasts Superman with his new jetpack he got in the last episode.
You get a raise.
I get paid?
I will say, one thing I'm not a fan of is that Lex brings out a giant robot for it to get taken out in 20 seconds. I'm not joking. It's kind of pathetic, but quite funny. I do want to mention that it's kind of funny that Poison Ivy only has one line in this episode and that's it. It makes it feel like the show couldn't afford the voice actress for more than literally one line, as she says nothing at all in the first episode, and is put down to the role of a mime. Goes below the first part though. Vertigo has Batman and Green Arrow teaming up to stop Count Vertigo, as he's wreaking havoc in Gotham City. Yeah, this episode's solid. It's quite interesting since Green Arrow doesn't even know that Batman is Bruce Wayne, so obviously Batman has to reassure Green Arrow that Bruce knows nothing about the sickness being caused at Wayne Labs. Obviously it's all just Count Vertigo since he's making people dizzy and sick from the sonic waves, but hey, this time around he doesn't have a design that makes him look like a complete idiot, which is good. With that, yet again, I think Batman works well with Green Arrow as well. Their chemistry is enjoyable to watch, and especially the moment where Bruce reveals himself to Green Arrow and knows that he's Oliver Queen. It's good. On top of that, the backstory of Green Arrow is interesting, where Count Vertigo was an ex-employee of his company that attacked him and made him fall off his boat and wash away to an island, where he swore to get back at Count Vertigo when he gets off the island. One thing that I find very odd is that Oliver was stranded on the island for years apparently. I can accept weeks or months, but dang, I guess I've never been stranded on an island before, but I just find it a bit weird. Even though Count Vertigo has a cool design, he really isn't that interesting as he's just doing all this stuff for power. Goes at the bottom. This episode has Firefly getting into an accident which gives him new powers, as he turns himself into the new villain named Phosphorus. I noticed that these episodes are dropping off in quality after the first two. It's still a solid episode, but it's definitely nothing to rave about, that's for sure. Another thing I've noticed in these episodes so far is that they're all much lighter in tone compared to the last season. It's a lot like season 3 in regards to how this season has a light tone so far, but obviously a lot more Justice League this time around. I have to say that when Firefly turns into Phosphorus, he becomes a less fun character because I actually didn't mind the quips that Firefly had when he was Firefly, but now he doesn't really do quips anymore. He has a couple, but they all have to do with his new power of being hot. I just realised that we haven't even seen Batgirl in any of these episodes yet in season 5, but hey, at least she's in this one. Hell yeah, we get another new Batsuit, and this low-key goes hard as fuck. With that, as good as it is to get an episode of the show that's more in line with the other episodes in the show, this is probably the weakest so far. Also, damn, I didn't know that Haley Smith jumped from American Dad to this show. This time around we have the Flash coming to Gotham, as he has to team up with Batman and Robin to put a stop to Mirror Master. Okay, this is a little better. I will say, all these team up episodes where Batman and Robin have to team up with some other superhero are just all pretty similar in quality. I will say so far that the Batman and Superman two-part has done it the best. I really like how Mirror Master this time around is actually able to copy the superheroes by creating a mirror image of them, but even though I really like the Flash in the DCAU, this time around he's kind of annoying. I find that to be such a shame because the Flash is usually a really good character, but all his character is this time around is that he's fast and wants to eat a lot because of his metabolism. That's really it. To be fair, it's really hard to compete with the DCAU's version of the character. Like literally there's no depth to his character at all. Anywho, Mirror Master's plan isn't that great, as he literally just wants to put people in mirrors and try to bargain them to let them out, as he manages to get some people into mirrors, but fails after that. Goes above White Heat, but below Vertigo. Joker Express has the Joker mind-bending the people of Gotham to make them commit crimes for him, as Batman, Batgirl and Robin have to obviously go and stop the Joker's plans. This is a really cool idea, but the episode's alright. I don't know. I just feel like it could have been done better. It would have been really cool if after the people stole stuff for the Joker, they'd be stuck with a permanent smile like they would have in the past, because I always liked how disturbing that was. Instead, it's just temporary mind control where they get set free after stealing stuff for the Joker, which is a bit lame. Would have given this episode a lot more stakes, as early on in this episode, Batgirl gets affected by it but quickly gets taken out of it without any harm done to her really, besides from stealing a few pieces of jewelry for a couple of minutes. The mystery is kind of interesting, as it leads to all three of them getting brainwashed, as they figure out that it has something to do with the lights on the train, but besides that, this episode is just pretty average. With that, the Joker's actual plan when catching the three of them is kinda lame, as he wants to blow up all the mining tunnels and make Gotham fall into a sinkhole. Just feels like a bit of a stretch for a Joker plan, doesn't it? I still like this episode, but this season so far is definitely weaker than the last. Goes above A Mirror Darkly, but below Vertigo. Okay, so we're back to these type of episodes where Batman has to team up with one of the Justice League members, as this time around Batman teams up with Green Lantern to stop both Sinestro and the Penguin. This isn't anything amazing, but it's just a fun episode. I've always had a soft spot for Green Lantern, because he's arguably one of my favourite superheroes out there, since they're basically just space cops with ring powers, and with that, this time around Sinestro is actually really well done. I really fuck with the voice, and funny about that, it's Vandal Savage himself, Miguel Ferrer. You should check out my Young Justice video, by the way. Anyways, it's actually quite cool that Sinestro beats Hell, and when he does, Hell makes the ring go to Batman, but of course the Penguin interrupts the ring and takes it for himself. He obviously just uses the ring to steal stuff, which is kind of fun, but I kind of wish that we got to see Batman with the Green Lantern ring for longer. Would have been neat to see how much of a fight he could have put up against Sinestro, since if you ask me, Bruce probably has one of, if not the strongest willpower out there in the universe. Hey, at least he gets to steal Sinestro's ring to save the day. Goes above Vertigo, but below the Batman Superman story part 2. The Metal Face of Comedy has something random happen, as the Joker's personality is downloaded into some nanotech, as it poses an even bigger threat to Batman than the actual Joker ever did. I will say I definitely didn't expect Nightwing at the start of this episode, but apparently it's all in a video game. As this episode goes, it's alright. Talking about the start of the episode though, the villain in the game named Slash is voiced by Diedrich Bader. What the hell? And also Patton Oswalt shows up again as this person Dick was playing against in the game, and is also one of Joker's henchmen. Okay. Well, I quite like how when the digital Joker happens, he basically just becomes a computer virus, and of course he takes control of the nanites. I will say the best part of this episode is seeing how the two Jokers interact with each other, and how they decide to work together but plan on double-crossing each other. I'm not a fan of the climax where the nanotech Joker just becomes a giant version of the Joker. They could have really done something more interesting with that. Goes above White Heat but below A Mirror Darkly. Okay, did we really need the terrible trio to come back at all in a Batman show? No, thought so. Anywho, they're here if I like it or not, as the trio have actually turned themselves into a shark, a fox and a vulture, using the Man-Bat formula, as Batman and Batgirl have to deal with all three of them. Hey, at least they did something different with the characters, but this is the weakest episode so far. Honestly, what a surprise that the episode with the terrible trio was the worst. One thing that is odd but I actually kinda like is that Kirk Langstrom actually got out of Arkham and turned his life around by being a professor again, and actually has nothing to do with what's going on besides from it being similar to the Man-Bat serum. The trio themselves, though, are basically just outsiders that want to get revenge on all the jocks at the university they're studying at. And what the hell? One of their roommates is Chris Pratt? That was a surprise, but alright. Anywho, coincidentally, Barbara's studying at the same uni that the trio are at, and at least she figures out pretty quick who the trio are, since she's interacted with them a few times before. Also, bullshit that Batman and Batgirl couldn't escape this small cage meant for animals straight away. I highly doubt that, since they escape it pretty easily after they leave. Like, why didn't they just leave when they got locked in there in the first place and actually fight them? They could have, stopped, everything that happens in the third act. Anywho, the fox ends up turning into some type of creature, as a lot of the serum falls onto him. But it's basically pointless since he gets knocked out in 2 seconds after he transforms. Easily at the bottom. This episode's just really boring. I'm definitely interested in an episode titled The End of Batman, but basically this episode has Batman and Robin facing their opposites known as Wrath and Scorn. Finally, we get a good episode. Yeah, most of the episodes in this season have just been average, so it's good to see an episode in this season that's actually good. With that, I'm glad that this episode doesn't make it a big surprise that Wrath and Scorn are the Mallorys, but they just aren't interesting since they're basically just villains that dress up like superheroes. The only thing they do that is interesting is they hire villains to help them take down Batman and Robin, and also commit a heist that Batman of course has set up for them as bait. The best part of this episode is probably the moment where Wrath and Batman figure out each other's identities, but they're actually a good threat to both Batman and Robin, as they even manage to find the Batcave. I don't have anything else to say besides from this just being an enjoyable episode. Goes above Ring Toss, but below the Batman Superman story part 2. What Goes Up has Batman teaming up with yet another Justice League member, but this time around he teams up with Hawkman, as they have to go and stop Black Mask and Shadow Thief. This is probably the second worst episode in the season. I don't know, this just isn't very interesting at all, besides the fact that Hawkman is voiced by Robert Patrick, and hey, even Diedrich Bader is back, but this time he's voicing Shadow Thief. Speaking about not interesting, both the villains really aren't interesting at all, as Shadow Thief is just working for Black Mask, and Black Mask just wants to rob a bank using nth metal. It's cool to see the effects that the metal has on everyday things, but besides that, this episode is just extremely average. I hate that I just don't have much to say about this episode, because it was kind of forgettable. Goes above Attack of the Terrible Trio, but below White Heat. Alright, so this is the last 2 episodes of the show, and it's a 2-parter. This follows mostly Batman, Robin, and Green Arrow, as they have to figure out where the other Justice League members are being held, as they uncover the secret of their disappearance. This is alright. I was actually enjoying the first half of this episode, but to be completely honest, when we find out that it's the joining again, I kinda got a little annoyed if anything. It's cool that Hugo Strange is teaming up with them, but now the joining are basically just Brainiac light, without having one interesting robotic personality, and I'm definitely not a fan. The cliffhanger we're left on with the powerful heroes' powers being sucked up into robots is kinda cool, as they have to find a way to beat them without the heroes having their powers, but besides that, it's just alright. Goes above Vertigo, but below Ring Toss. So, the final episode of the show continues where we left off, as the joining attempt to invade Earth yet again, as the Justice League have to team up, even without their powers to put a stop to them. Just much of the same, honestly. Yeah, this whole 2-parter just feels like the joining 2-parter, but not as good, as it's literally just the same thing again, besides from the heroes losing their powers to then get them back halfway through this episode. With that, I like how there's a main personality to the joining that shows up and gives Hugo ultimate knowledge, but after that, the personality in the robot just disappears and doesn't say anything, which is lame. Still enjoyable, but yet again, I just don't have much to say about it. Just above the first part. It sucks to say, but this season was a downgrade from the last one. It's still enjoyable to say the least, but going from my favourite season, which was consistently good, to this is kinda disappointing. I still enjoyed episodes like The End of Batman and the Batman Superman story 2-parter, but this season's a lot like season 3 in regards to its overall tone. It's just really light-hearted overall compared to the last season, and it doesn't really have any serious episodes like what I liked in season 4, having a good balance of lighter and darker episodes. With that, one thing I think that this show balances quite well since the Justice League were brought into this show is the balance between Justice League episodes and Batman episodes. It was quite 50-50 in regards to having the Justice League focused episodes to Batman episodes, and I think that works fine since Batman's still the main focus in the Justice League episodes. I still would have preferred the show to be the way it was before this season without the League members, since after all, it is a Batman show. I guess WB just didn't have the confidence to do another Justice League show since the last Justice League show ended 2 years before this all came out, but yeah, alright, okay. I still like this season, and it definitely isn't my least favourite, but I do wish it was better. So that was The Batman, and I really like the show. Before I get into my complete thoughts on the show though, let's rank every single episode of The Batman from worst to best, and to start off this list at the bottom is Attack of the Terrible Trio, RPM, Q&A, Pets, Swamped, The Butler Did It, Big Heat, Philo Was the Mole, A Fistful of Felt, Fire and Ice, What Goes Up, Brawn, The Laughing Cats, The Man Who Would Be Bat, Cash for Toys, A Dark Night to Remember, The Big Dummy, Topsy Turvy, Coal of the Cobblepot, Bird of Prey, Traction, White Heat, The Metal Face of Comedy, The Big Chill, A Mirror Darkly, The Cat, the Bat, and the Very Ugly, Joker Express, Batgirl Begins Part 1, Batgirl Begins Part 2, Vertigo, The Bat and the Belfry, Thunder, Grundy's Night, The Cat and the Bat, Ragdolls to Riches, Clayfaces, Lost Heroes Part 1, Lost Heroes Part 2, The Icy Depths, The Everywhere Man, Rumours, Riddled, Ring Toss, JTV, The Joining Part 1, The Apprentice, Team Penguin, The Breakout, The Joining Part 2, The End of the Batman, Riddler's Revenge, The Rubber Face of Comedy, The Batman Superman Story Part 2, The Batman Superman Story Part 1, Meltdown, Seconds, The Clayface of Tragedy, Two of a Kind, Strange Minds, Night in the City, Artifacts, A Matter of Family, Gotham's Ultimate Criminal Mastermind, The Laughing Bat, and lastly, the best episode of The Batman is Strange New World. When starting this show with both seasons 1 and 2, I really enjoyed how different this show is in both style and its tone. It's cool how this show really leans into the gothic nature of the character in every single way, because the designs alone of most of the characters go really damn hard, and I think everyone would agree with me on that one. This show definitely gets better later on in both of those seasons. A great example of that is the final 2 episodes of Season 1, where we get to see Ethan Bennett turn into Clayface, as we followed the character throughout the first season, and really got to know them before they turned for the worst. With that, my biggest gripe with the seasons after the first 2 is the fact that the show has a complete tonal shift with dropping so much of what we got used to in the show with its first 2 seasons. They could have worked both Detective Alan Yin and Chief Rojas into the later seasons of the show, but I guess they just didn't even bother and made it more of a standard Batman show. I find that to be a good and a bad thing, because bringing in characters like Commissioner Gordon, Batgirl, and Robin is a good thing, but I just don't like how those things are brought in to replace what we already had. With that aside, Season 4 really surprised me because I felt like that season was more tonally consistent to what Seasons 1 and 2 did, and overall it was actually my favourite season. We got some absolutely great episodes in Season 4 that I enjoyed a lot, such as Artifacts, A Matter of Family, and especially Strange New World. I still really respect what this show managed to do with the character of Batman in his rogues gallery, but it definitely feels like WB was forcing them to do things that they weren't particularly interested in doing in Seasons 3 and 5. I could be wrong, but it definitely feels that way. Anyways, hey, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give it a like, comment your thoughts, and obviously subscribe. With that, shout out to Victoria Huntley for supporting my Goldfellas tier. Also, check out my Patreon, it should be on screen up here at the moment or in the description. Make sure to go support it and help me out because I want to keep doing this full time. I got some cool new benefits and stuff. I have revamped my Patreon, so even for $2 a month you can get early access to new videos, and in the higher tiers you can get cool things like commentary tracks, the shoutouts like what I just did then, and all cool things like that. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next video.